Um, but it is actually Shiva who, through his Nataraj image, is seen all over the north, south, east, west of the country. And the period in which the Shiva Nataraj was created was in the Chola dynasty, where the bronzes became very, very popular. And instead of going to the sites of temples, these icons of Nataraj in the form of bronzes was carried all over the country and even abroad. So Shiva as Nataraj becomes the most popular imagery to most of us. More than that is the Shivaling, which you all know is the ethiophalic form of Shiva. The minute you see a Shivaling, you think of Shiva. So there is the Linga, which is a sign coming from the Sanskrit word Ling, which means sign, and then the Shiva Nataraj. Sohini, being a dancer, I want to ask her, what does really Shiva mean to her? Not only as a cosmic dancer, because here she has called her book Adi Shiva, which is the primordial god, the philosophy of cosmic unity. So I want, because when you buy her book, I don't know, is it available? Yes. So when you buy the book, it's a very interesting book. It is a book for those who want to know a little more than what meets the eye, not that academic that it will gather dust on your bookshelf. It is very beautifully written, and it has all the finer nuances of Shiva, right from the 108 names to how Shiva is looked upon in the present day scenario. So I just want to actually ask you, Sohini, you're a dancer, you're an author, obviously you've read the text. What does Shiva mean to you personally?
Shiva to me means dynamic energy and conscious stillness, which we need to recover ourselves, recover our arts, and the world needs to recover. It's that conscious, mindful stillness, which is actually our superpower to function, to dance, and to do anything that we choose to. So, that stillness of Adi Shiva is what is the kernel of future dynamism. That contemplation, that conscious stillness, and that utter comfort of sleep or darkness, which helps you heal, which helps give you a better perspective, and which helps your mind and body and action to achieve what you want to.
For those of you who have not Googled her or looked at her work, she's also done a book on Kali. So that is the other part of energy, the feminine. This is the masculine, the Shiva Shakti, which she has explained in one of her chapters called Ardhanarishwar. So while she has worked on the terrifying aspect of the feminine form as Kali, I want to understand from you, Sohini, how have you, in the context of the terrifying Kali, decoded Shiva?
Thank you, Alka. First of all, I'm very happy to be here at Pune International Lit Fest, beautifully put together with Manjari. And Alka, it's an honor to be moderated by you because you're my favorite moderators and my favorite scholar too. So thank you for being here today. So Kali for me, I spend a lot of time in Europe and US. And I've always found Kali to be a very misunderstood goddess. And the phenomenon of India exotica and India idiotica looming large. And you have a Heidi Klum, dressing up as Kali and saying, okay, I'm going as my favorite demon Kali for Halloween. And all the magazines in the world are covering her. So that is very offensive. That was very offensive and disrespectful for me. And being from Calcutta, being from the city of Kali, And we were Kali Bhakts. My mother's side of the family owns the ancestral temple of Kali in Siddheshwari Tala. So I wanted to decode Kali and bring it out. And while you're doing that, you realize your self-awareness too, that Kali and Shiva are basically two sides of the same coin. Same coin, because when we are talking about the divine feminine or the quintessential masculine, they are in support of each other, two parts of the same whole, the perfect whole, and they complement each other completely. So the women empowerment is without otherization of the man. It's with the full support for a complete human mind and body. So that is how Kali and Shiva for me were related. And Shiva is actually Shava, the dead body. And it is the stillness, the consciousness. And Kali is the energy, which is actually how our Vedas, our Puranas define the masculine and the feminine. That it is only Kali's dynamism, Shaktism's dynamism, energy, which breathes life into Shiva, who's a dead body otherwise, for him to perform and be dynamic. So that was the close relation of Shiva and Kali for me, and part of the same bigger picture.
So, you've done a lot of textual referencing also, but before I ask you to show a little bit of your practice, I want to actually turn to page 41, where you have referred to some not so well known texts of a literature, of sacred literature, where you are talking about the iconographies of Shiva which emerges from these texts. There is the Anshubhed Agam, which was around the 7th century under the Pallava dynasty, which mentions the word Nataraj, and I'm zeroing down more in the first half of our conversation to Nataraj, because you are a dancer. We will come to him as a musician and his other names later. And then there was another text, again, a volume of Tamil hymns, which was also published in the 9th century, called the Thiru Sangam. In this, the saint Manika Sagar, a Shiva devotee, explains the philosophical concept of the cosmic cycle of destruction and regeneration. Could you tell us a little bit about why you chose these two particular texts in trying to show the cosmic unity and Shiva as Nataraj?
First of all, Shiva as Nataraj, is associated more with the Chidambaram temple. Because Shiva is the first and last word of creation. And entire creation, entire life is like a dance. And Shiva is at the very crux of it. So Nataraj, each movement actually symbolizes each aspect of life and living. For example, one of his hands being raised in Abhaya Mudra is the epitome of kindness, that you'll be fine, rest assured, just live. So that kindness, that empathy, that protection actually defines life. The other arm pointing out to the raised leg is about go move. It's the, karma yoga. Go on, move, be dynamic, and you achieve everything there is. So Nataraj, Shiva, Nataraj as the center of existence also defines that life, cosmos, is infinite, but it's also it's a cosmic dance. It's an abstract dance. It's a movement. It is a continuous movement that has always been and always be, while we are little specks in it. So in that higher philosophical context, Nataraj, besides being the divine danseuses, besides being the dancer that all dance forms, center around, that is the very crux of life and living, that it's all a dance. And the second part, what was, sorry, what was your second part? It was second part of
Why
your
you
question.
have chosen those particular hymns from South India to explain the nature of his cosmic persona and his Nataraj persona, because one is done by a saint and the other is an agam text which tells you the iconography. Because in the agam text it is written what should the murti be made of, what are the
Dhatus, yeah.
yes, what are the you know symbols through which, or the mudras through which, or the icons through which that you people like us art historians decode. Is it a Brahma image, is it a Vishnu image, is it a Shakti image, is it an Amman? Because they are known by the icons they carry with them. Who's carrying a pash, who's carrying a trishula, who's carrying a khadagamala. So would you like to explain why did you choose these texts in particular?
Because for me it was something lesser known, and because also there's so many writings on Shiva, and everywhere you go there's a Nataraja statue, but there is so much more to Shiva than his Nataraja image, and the deeper philosophy behind it, and the healing powers, and the close connection to CERN and scientific researches, which makes it so globally relevant. So I thought these slightly lesser known facts, even the Shiva Sutras, which are supposed to have their healing effects immediately, that was very necessary, besides the dance aspect, Om Namah Shivaya, and decoding Shivaya with our, todiums and our tandavs and our tilanas. It was very essential for me to bring out these lesser known facts for better understanding of Shiva, and how you're using the dhatus, the material you're using, the metals you're using, how they have different symbolic meanings. It was important to bring forward these very scientific experiments, these very scientific perspectives also to the West.
So, in your study, have you noticed that there are very conscious delineations of Shiva Bhakti or the interpretation of Shiva in the north and the south?
Definitely, definitely. Between the north and the south, there are quite a few differences, but I would, the real culture, the real Indian culture, the real heritage, actually, the more authentic sources are in the south. And Shiva's main temple is the Chidambaram temple. And the beliefs, the texts, there are definitely differences, but I prefer to go with the south, absolutely. But also on one scale, on the larger scale, it's a lot similar, because how different can you be? It's the same subject. That has always been there, and when you're coming to the north, there are also comparisons with Greek mythology, where you're comparing Shiva to Zeus, and you have the Gandhara art, where Buddha and Shiva are almost looking alike with those Gracio-Indian features. So a lot of fusion has happened in the north, whereas in the south, the texts are more authentic. And being a Bharatanatyam dancer myself, we followed more texts from the south, definitely.
Also, Shiva and Shakti, going back to that, is also seen. We all have these chakras in our bodies. So, you've mentioned that Shiva is the Sahasra Chakra and Parvati, his consort, is the Mooladhara Chakra. Would you like to shed light on how you have brought and made visible the connections between the chakras and Shiva Shakti?
Shiva and Shakti, Shiva is consciousness, and Shakti is the energy. And Shakti is needed to breathe life into Shiva, to propel him into that dynamism. And Kali is the epitome of Shakti there. And Shiva also, it can be interpreted as Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti being nature, and Purusha being Shiva, also the calm stillness, and Prakriti being more fickle, more stormy, and more unpredictable. like a woman. I'm very proud to say that, of course. So it is the combination of Shiva and Shakti that makes the world go round, that anything may happen. And there's also the little connection between Shakti and Krishna, which I had explored in the book on Kali, that Shiva and Shakti, Shiva and Parvati, being completely in love, wanted to experiment with gender fluidity. And Shiva was born as Radha, and Kali was born as Krishna, because Shiva wanted to explore that patience and fortitude of Radha. And therefore, they wanted to test their love for each other. And hence, they reversed their roles. Kali was Krishna, and Shiva was Radha, as an experiment. So Shiva and Shakti, Purusha and Prakriti, they combine to create havoc or to create calm. And that havoc is necessary when violence comes forth in the contemporary world, when the world wars are coming together, the violence is happening in Ukraine or Gaza. So that Tandav is necessary. You also, and Shakti, kind of getting stormy is necessary to cut down on evil and restore calm, peace, and balance on earth. So Shiva and Shakti as consciousness and energy is the yin and yang that keeps the cosmos functioning.
So before we go into the other manifestations of Shiva, I'd like you to read one of your favorite pieces which shows the essence of Shiva to.
Thank you. About the book is very short, but I wanted to communicate that to you. Shiva represents the quintessential divine masculine, a symbol of consciousness, strength, and stillness. In the realm of chakras and spiritual practices, Shiva's energy is often invoked to bring about transformation and awakening. Shiva is the ultimate empath. The third eye symbolizes empathy. He's infinite and not bound by social norms, is the epitome of non-judgmental acceptance of all. We are all one is the philosophy of Shiva that fosters global harmony and humanism at its core. Today, when a third of the world is at war, there are 13 unresolved conflicts globally. Shiva's philosophy is all about bringing humanity together in compassion, in harmony, in world peace.
Thank you for that. So, another thing what I love about our, these days I'm hesitant to use the word religion. Maybe I'll just like to say about our culture or our gods. We have so many of them, and we can choose who we want to make our own Ishta. But with Shiva, there are a number of stories, and one of the most famous ones, is that of the story of Daksha, the great sacrifice, his insult, how his beloved wife becomes a sati, and how he creates the Veerabhadra at that moment, and how the grief-stricken Shiva, carrying the dead inert body of his wife, is going to do the great Tandava. People go rushing to Vishnu, who says the only way to appease or take away the grief of Shiva and prevent Tandav, Pralay happening is to dismember the body. So with his Sudarshan Chakra, he cuts up the body. Some people say into 108 parts, some people say 51. These become all the Shakti Peeths. And Shiva calms down. So you see, Shiva is a man of great anger, of great resilience, of great enjoyment. It is also said, one of the stories, and that's again why I said I love that about our culture, is you interpret. There are so many stories for every one little thing. That when how was the one of the stories about the Kama Sutra is that it was first written by Nandi when he heard the sounds of the lovemaking of Shiva and Parvati in Mount Kailash. And then that was whispered to Ganesh, or then that was put together by the celibate sage Vatsayan. So, what you see, that is why he's called the great master of yoga, the Adi Yogi, the great enjoyer of life as the Adi Bhogi, and then he's also got this great anger in him. So, this is one aspect of Shiva that we see and hear about, but we don't really know so much about. There are very many other stories, like one of them, I don't know how many of you have been to Rameshwaram? Yeah? So, do you know the story why it is called Rameshwaram? So, this temple was actually made Ram Ka Ishwar. So, even Ram, Vishnu, he was a manifestation of Ram, prays to Shiva. Before he goes, the only time when Ram actually took the pinak in his hand to kill was for Ravan. He never killed otherwise. It was always Lakshman who was killing. So he goes here to pray to Shiva and also to the Surya Devata, the Aditya Hridayam, which he prays here to give him the energy to fight. So it is here that Ram also came and worshipped Shiva. Ram ka Ishwar Rameshwaram. So that's another aspect of Shiva which is beautiful and which appeals to me greatly, because I'm increasingly from a Shiva and Devi Bhakt becoming a Bhakt of Vishnu, because that's Bhakti. Then there are also incidents of how Ravan, who, if I don't know how many of you have seen the Kailashnath temple in Ellora. So, have you seen that panel where Ravan shaking the Mount Kailash, where Parvati and Shiva are sitting when he gets that great boon? Ravan does that great stuti for Shiva. So he's a great Shiva Bhakt also. Very few people know about the gyan and knowledge of how knowledgeable Ravan was. We only think of him as this terrible Asura. So Shiva is also seen in a different light by Ravan. So that's a different form. So now I'm going to ask Sohini that from being a dancer, he was also a great musician. There are some beautiful sculptures where you see Shiva as a Veena Dhari Shiva. He was a great player. It was not just Narad who did Narayan with his Ektara. Shiva was known to be a great, in addition to being a great dancer, he was a great musician. And there are beautiful sculptures of Ardhanari Shiva playing the Veena. So he's known as the Veena Dhari Shiva. And Sohini has some images of Shiva as the Veena Dhari Shiva. So I'd like you to tell me a little more and our audience a little more about that, because music and dance is like speech and sound. They go so well together. So how does Shiva become a cosmic musician as well as a cosmic dancer?
Shiva personally crafted the Rudra Veena, and drawing inspiration from the exquisite appearance of Parvati, his companion, and tamed the serpents who were supposed to be very fearsome reptiles, and mesmerized the serpents with the music. And it was when the Rishi Saraba started singing, to praise Shiva, It is then that the serpents were completely mesmerized, and the raga Shankara Varnam was created. And Shankara Varnam, the Saptashwar, in it has meaning. You know, each of them have meaning. Because Sa represents the Sarpa, the snakes. Re represents the Rudraksh, Re. Ga represents Ganga. Ma represents the Mruga, deer. Pa represents Pushpa. Dha represents the Damaru sound, and Ni represents the Nishakar, moon. So that is how all nature was put together in a canvas. And the ragas emanated from Shiva to symbolize his love for Parvati, to also bring out the beauty and the music of nature together. And the serpents were completely mesmerized and moving to the sound of the Shankara Varnam, no longer fearsome creatures but complete patrons of music. To And there are other ragas like the raga Hindolam, the raga Bhairavi, which all came. Shiva was the source of these ragas, and also the Sanskrit grammar of music came from Shiva. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll just round it up and say that how Shiva in some ways becomes the gods of the gods. Whereas we also hear of Indra being the god of the gods, but in the Trimurti, it is actually Shiva. And in him rests the whole thing of abstraction and figuration. Because in Indian thought, Sharira is very important. That is why God is made in the image of man. And that is why, for most of us, it is so much easier for bhakti, for worship, for rituals when we have murtis. Nirakar is Shiva. Shiva is also known as that. Nirakar is Shiva. But that's a very, very difficult and abstract. You have to be very, very evolved to reach that. That is why why did we make Devalayas? I don't want to call them temples because Devalayas were the original abode of the gods. They were the sacred spaces. These were the spaces which were community spaces. And as an art historian, I also call them our first living museums because the image of God was made there. Anything to do with settlement of politics, from marriage to the Devadasis, to the musicians, whether you look at the temples of Brihadeshwara with his 1,000-pillared halls and all the karnas, the 108 karnas, which Dr. Padma Subramaniam has decoded so beautifully in her book, you see that all of that was done as an embellishment or shringar in the temples, whether they are the Nagar style or the Vesara style of central India or the Dakshina style of the deep south, you will see beauty and embellishment. And north, south, east, west, you have the presence of Shiva everywhere. So it's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Sohini, for the book. Thank you for being such a wonderful and attentive audience. And please feel free to ask any questions. I know sometimes it's difficult to ask questions. I hate asking questions. But just feel free. It's like, you know, yeah.
Writer. So, is there any ancient text or any book where the image of Lord Shiva has been explained? How he looks? Because I guess every other god has an image, but Lord Shiva don't have an image as such. How he looks appears. So,
I think by Shiva, the image that just looms large is the Nataraj, with the various aspects, with its various symbolism. So, with the leg lifted up, standing on Apasmara, with the trident in one hand and the Damaru in the other, you know. So, that is the image of Shiva that we are most familiar with.
Yeah, so that's a familiar image. But to answer your question, if you go back to the Shilpa Shastras, you look up J.N. Banerjee's book on the iconography of Indian arts and look up the Shiva Purana. So in the Shiva Puran, you will have different aspects of Shiva. There are different, first it begins with the ethiophalic form of the lingas, the chalalingas, the different kinds. How should a linga be placed? What should be the dhatu of which? How should they be placed? Should it be made in stone? If it is made in stone, what should the parameters be? There's A. Ramachandra Rao also, who's written a book on the iconography of the gods, so you can look at that. Then there is this other book by Ramachandra from Bangalore. He has deconstructed some of the Shilpa texts. So there is no one particular text that you follow. There are a number because our knowledge, whether it is the Veds, it comes from an oral tradition. For us, it was Smriti, Vak, and Shruti. We never wrote down many things. It was all collated and amalgamated over the years. So if you look at different aspects of the Shilpa Shastras, different Sthapatis have also written differently about it. So it also depends on what material is being chosen to represent Shiva. If it is being done in a temple, if it is being done as a moving icon, all canons are there. You need to investigate them, and a lot of them are in the Sanskrit texts and the Shilpa Shastra. So you need to, but J.N. Banerjee is a good place to start, and the Shiva Agam text is a good place to start. So there you will get information.
Hello, my name is Vishwanath, named after Lord Shiva. So, the question I have is related to the representation of Shiva. I mean, I read somewhere that Shiva being represented as a lingam actually came from the Tantra style of worship. Originally, it was not there. So, my question is, how true is that? I mean, was originally Shiva represented as a person with the snake, the moon, and everything, and also in the form of Nataraja, and then later this Shiva as a lingam was absorbed into the Shiva Bhakti cult.
Would you like to answer? Because Joni and it's your subject.
So, I don't think I'd like to agree with you that Shiva came in the tantric thing, because Tantra as a sect, it's not really a religion. It came out in the 10th century. But before that, we've had Swayambhus. So what is Swayambhu? जो अपने आप से उत्पन्न होता है, ठीक है? So there are Swayambhus all over. And if you go back to the Jyotirlingas, many of them are Swayambhus. So what you see there, it goes back. I don't know if it'll go back to the Indus Valley, that I'm not sure of, but definitely the Vedic period it does, because in the Indus Valley there is a seated form of Pashupati. We don't know if it is Shiva, because he's the lord of animals, and one of the names, like Vishwanath, is Pashupatinath. In Nepal, the temple is Pashupatinath. So what people are ascribing that seated image of Pashupati to Shiva, they say that Shiva was also a pre-Vedic god. So these are, we interpret. Our religion is a deeply interpretive religion. So this is an interpretation. And I do think that definitely the linga is definitely pre-tantric, because tantric is 10th century. That's much too late. We've had temples, the Pallav temples are before the 10th century, 7th century onwards, when you see them.
Yeah, myself, Dr. Bharat Sarodaya, I'm a psychiatrist. As we many times say, that God is one, and in Hindu culture there are lots of gods and goddesses. So just you said these are the interpretations of various gods we believe. because it said that God has created the universe and we created the God. God is two types of gods. One who created everything, and another man made the gods and given the names and perception. So how the Hindu mythology pursues all gods and goddesses, and how we symbolize each one.
It's such a difficult question. I'm just trying to digest it. But what I would say is that, to a large extent, it is us who's created the gods and goddesses. And I think in any society which becomes more structured, we develop a hierarchy. And even the hierarchy was created by us, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Now, how do the Brahmins keep their power? They have to create something which nobody else can. It's all about territorialization. So you don't enter my space. I am going to be the Dvija, the twice born, who's going to be the medium between the supreme power and us. So I think it was created by man, the gods and goddesses. It was also, there are no two ways of saying that there is a power above, whether it is in the form of any name you take it, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Allah, whether it's Zoroaster, whether it's Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Definitely there is a power, and we are a country of 33 million gods. So we create our own gods. The minute we are still creating our own gods. अब आजकल के तो नए भगवान पैसा है ना, तो we are still creating Kuberas. New Kuberas are being created, new Asuras are being created. So I think it is mankind or humankind who has created the gods to suit their particular raison d'etre. And it suits us to it's all about being a creature of faith. And as they say, faith moves mountains. आप पत्थर ले आओ नर्मदा से और रख दो अपनी पूजा घर में तो वो शिवलिंग बन जाता है ना. So this is my interpretation.
Thank you, Dr. Alka Pande.